Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to our Tuesday evening home Bible study. Tonight we'll be looking at Genesis 33, which concludes the story of Jacob coming home and his meeting with Esau. Last time we saw that Jacob was apprehensive about meeting Esau, particularly when he was informed that Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. And Jacob, of course, came up with a scheme to try to appease, to sort of soften the face of Esau, and sent these presents ahead, these droves of animals, goats and camels and various things. These just, he would send a group and then another group and then another group, and each of the herdsmen were instructed when they met Esau to say, "These are a present from your servant Jacob." And then he had put all of his family across the brook Yabok at the ford there, and in the night he was by himself, still on the side that they were crossing from, and a man wrestled with him. It's sort of like Jacob was attacked. I wonder if at first if he thought, "Oh no, it's Esau." But it turns out that it's more than a man. The text doesn't specifically say this, but as you look at the other scriptures that refer to this, for example, Hosea tells us that it was an angel that he wrestled with, and Jacob names the place Peniel, face of God, for I've seen God face to face. He's had an encounter with God. Again, John tells us two places in the Gospel of John and in 1 John that no man has seen God at any time, but Jacob has gotten a revelation from God, and it's as God has turned dimmed his dimmer switch down on his glory, and perhaps this might have even been a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. Like perhaps when the three men came to see Abraham earlier, and one of them was God. No hard and fast distinction in the Old Testament between the angel of God or the angel of the Lord and the Lord himself. Oftentimes it's the angel of the Lord, and then in speaking it turns out to be God himself. It happens actually, Moses at the burning bush, that you can read that, and it does it there. It does it when after Abraham is offered taking Isaac up Mount Moriah in chapter 24, just numerous times in the Old Testament. Anyway, Jacob is crippled the next morning. He has refused to let go of this angel, or of the angel of the Lord, and I won't let you go till you bless me. And he has learned to cling, and the blessing, the idea of getting a blessing, is kind of a central theme in the life of Jacob. He stole the one from that Esau was supposed to get, dressed up like Esau, and tricked his father, and wanted it so bad, but now he's wanting not a blessing from his father, he's wanting a blessing from God. And it's interesting, the first encounter that he had with the Lord at Bethel back in chapter 28, when he was fleeing to go to Padan-aram to Haran, same place, to get away from Esau, and he had seen the vision of the ladder, and the God had made all those promises to him, and he had said, "If the Lord will be with me and give me clothes to wear and food to eat, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God, and of all that you give me, I'll surely give a tenth to you." Again, he kind of bartering with God on the next morning after that first vision. However, the next verse says he lifted up his feet and went on his way. He had a new lilt in his step, and fresh energy and hope for the future. Well, it's all different this time. Instead of lifting up his feet, he's hobbling along after this encounter with God. Again, depending on what's going on with us and what it is that we need in our lives, I mean, the Lord appears to us and does exactly what's needed at the time. And sometimes we need chastening, sometimes we need encouraging, and whatever it is that we need, that's what he's there to do. Anyway, and chapter 33 now begins, and it's the next morning, and he has hobbled across the brook to be with his family, and they're headed off to meet Esau now. And Jacob lifted up his eyes. See, his head's been down. He's been looking at the ground. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, or look, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaids. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost, or last of all. They're his favorite. Again, we'll talk about that in a few moments, but you can only imagine how the other children felt. And he passed over before them. Well, at least that's good. And bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, this is Esau, and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children whom God has graciously given thy servant. And the handmaids came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. After came Joseph near, and Rachel, now remember Benjamin's not been born yet, and bowed themselves. And Esau says, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, These are to find grace in the eyes of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, or literally says, I have much, my brother. Keep what thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand, for therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God. Remember, he said, I've seen God face to face, and now I've seen your face, and it's like meeting God. And thou wast pleased with me, or you have had favor on me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And it's worded differently than it was when Esau said it. Esau's literally translates, I have much. Jacob literally translates, I have everything. And he urged him, and he took it. And he said, Let us take our journey, Esau said, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds with young that are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord, unto Sire, which is about 90 miles further on south, and that's the home of Esau and later the Edomites. And Esau said, Let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way unto Sire. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him an house, and made booths for his cattle. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth, which means booths or tabernacles. It's actually brush huts is the real meaning of it. And Jacob came to Shalim related to shalom, it means safety, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padanaram and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar and called it El Israel, God, the God of Israel. And we'll stop right there. Hobbling along the next morning after being attacked by the angel of God and wrestling all night and refusing then to let the angel go until you have blessed me. And the angel said, "What is your name?" He says, "Yaakov." He says, "Your name will no longer be Yaakov, heel grabber. It will be Israel, Prince of God, for as a prince you have wrestled with God and prevailed." And so Jacob has had an encounter with God, and he has had the hollow of his thigh has been touched, and he is crippled on it and is limping along, and he is still worried about meeting with Esau. In fact, the whole idea, the key word in chapter 32, I don't think I even mentioned it in Hebrew, is the word panim, face. And when Jacob had said back in verse 20 of chapter 22, I will appease him, or I will cover his face with it, with the present it goes before me, and the Hebrew word for before me means before my face, and afterward I will see his face. And so he sent the present over before him, or that is, before his face. And so you got the idea of seeing Esau's face and seeing his face and face and face, and then face of God. And he named the place Peniel, face of God, after he had said, I have seen God face to face. And then he finally, the face that he's dreading to meet is that of Esau, because he is so afraid that Esau is still going to want to kill him. He is so afraid that Esau has not forgiven him. He's so afraid that his relationship with his brother, with his twin brother, is still broken. And so he's hobbling along. He is dejected. After Bethel, after the angels ascending and descending on the ladder, lifted up his feet, eager to face the future, got to Herod and saw Rachel, there to water the sheep, and by himself he lifted the rock off the well and watered her flock and all that, just eager to face the future, a lot of zest, very encouraged. This time he's dejected. His name has been changed to Prince of God, but he is hobbling along, and he's weakened, and no longer is he the master of his situation. He is now hobbling along. He is at the mercy. He won't be able to flee from Esau if Esau's out to get him, because he can't hardly walk. And he's done everything he can to protect those that he loves. He sent all these droves ahead of his presence to intercept Esau and soften him up. And then he has the handmaids and their children, because they're not as precious, they're the children of the slaves, and he has the slave mothers and their children going first, and and then the wife that he doesn't love as much, Leah, and her children going behind them, and last of all, Rachel and Joseph. And it's going to come up in here in just about 3 chapters that Joseph is the favorite, and that didn't start in chapter 37 when we start reading the story of Joseph. It's been all along, and those other boys have all their lives have known from the day that Joseph was born that he's the one that Daddy loves the most. Leah knew the whole time she is married to Jacob that he really wanted Rachel. And they have struggled and suffered along in that home all that time. And here it is again. Rachel and Joseph are in the safest place in the very back of the caravan. Jacob at least does get in front of them all now, of the family, so that he can meet Esau and protect. At least he does love all of his children some. Doesn't love them equally, but he does love them some. And it's just a shame that that idea of favoritism among the children has been passed down. Now it's the third generation coming along that's been going on. You know, there was Abraham, and they had Ishmael, but with Hagar, but he wasn't near the favorite that Isaac was. And then there's Isaac, and Isaac loved Esau, and Rebekah loved Jacob, and so each of the parents had a favorite there. And so, you know, to Jacob, it's all normal. Whatever children grow up in, it seems normal to them. Anyway, so he goes ahead of his family, and Esau runs to meet him, and I'm sure Jacob is kind of quivering and just wondering what it's going to be like. And he ran, and instead of jumping on him like the angel did the night before, he fell on his neck and kissed him. He embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him. It sounds similar to the father of the prodigal son, doesn't it? And when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And here is Esau, runs and embraces him, fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept, both of them. What a moment, what a reunion. And everything is okay, or so it appears, at least for now. And then Esau looks up from this crying and hugging and reunion, and sees all the children and the women, and well, who are these? And he says, well, these are the children that God has graciously given your servant. Jacob, very humble still, you know. He's not really sure, and may not be sure even when the story's over, if Esau is truly, fully, completely forgiven him or not. Sometimes it's harder for us to accept forgiveness than it is for the one who forgives us to give it. And Jacob, I think, is struggling about whether or not to really believe that he is forgiven. Anyway, these are the children that the Lord God has graciously given your servant. Then the handmaidens came near, and they bowed, and you know, and Leah and her children bow, and of course, remember, I failed to mention it, but back in verse 3, when Jacob approached and Esau approached, Jacob bowed to the ground 7 times. According to what I've read, was kind of the custom when you entered the presence of Pharaoh. You would bow as you approached him 7 times. And Jacob is kind of overdoing it here a little bit with his brother, who's just a few minutes older than him. But again, Jacob is wanting to be sure, you know, he's coming back, and Esau's got 400 men. And he wants to be sure that it is a peaceful meeting, and doing everything he can to make it that way. You know, in Proverbs we're told that a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And Jacob is wanting to give the soft answer here. And so he's bowing, and he's saying, your servant, you know, these are the children that God's given your servant. And so then all the children come, you know, in turn, the children of the handmaids, the children of Leah and Leah, and then finally Joseph and Rachel. And then Esau says, well, what about all these droves of animals that I've been meeting, and what's that all about? And And Isaac says, these are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. These are to find grace, or to find favor in the sight of my Lord. In a sense, what Jacob is saying, these are asking for forgiveness, really, is what he's about. And Esau says, I have much. Your King James says enough, but here he says, I have much. I have a lot. So keep what you have. And Jacob says, no, if I truly have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present. And here's the thing, the test. If you really have forgiven me, then let me give you something. And again, forgive, our English word forgive, the emphasis is on the word, part of the word, it's give. You forgive, you're giving it. And he says, if you've truly forgiven me, then let me give you something. And that will show that you've forgiven me, is the idea. And so if I found grace in your sight, then receive my present. For I've seen your face as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me, or it could be translated, and you have shown favor to me, or you have granted forgiveness to me. How is it that Esau's face looked like the face of God? Because it was a face filled with forgiveness. And that's what Jacob needed. That's probably what Jacob saw in the night in wrestling with the angel. And the thing is, we need to have forgiveness from God, but we need to have forgiveness from those that we've wronged as well. And so Jacob now is connecting both experiences with the face of God. I've seen your face as it had been the face of God, and you showed favor to me. Take my blessing that's brought to thee. Now there's blessing again. Jacob had stolen Esau's blessing last time and had to run from home to keep from being killed by Esau. And now let me give you a blessing. This is not as good as what I took away from you, but I'm trying my best here to bless you and to make restitution insofar as I can. You know, real repentance always involves trying to make restitution insofar as you can. A lot of things cannot be made up. Many things cannot be, made up. But we need to demonstrate that, that we're trying as hard as we can. And he says, take my blessing, because God has dealt graciously. He's shown me favor, as you've shown me favor. And because I have everything I need. You said you have much. Well, I have everything I need. So let me give it to you. And he urged him, and he took it. And the fact that Esau took it showed that he was really okay with Jacob, and with Jacob coming back. It showed that he really had forgiven him as far as it could be shown. Jacob still may have a little trouble believing it. Again, their personalities so different also. And here again, just because they've made things right with each other doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to now be bosom pals and best friends. They're too different, for one thing. It may not be best for them to both, spend the rest of their lives, next door neighbors. I remember the poem that we studied in English. Robert Frost, good fences make good neighbors, and so it may be a little distance, may be best, but Esau is urging him to come on home with him, and he says, "Come on, let's take our journey, and I'll go ahead, and you come right on with us." And Jacob says, "Well, the children are tender. We've been traveling a lot, and the flocks and herds, they need to go slow, and I don't want to lose all my flocks. And so you go ahead, and we'll come along softly, and as the cattle and the children can do, and then till we get to Mount Seir, which is the home of Esau." About 90 more miles to the south. It's down below the Dead Sea. And so Esau says, "Okay, well, let me leave some people to help you with the flocks and the herds." And Jacob says, no, that's all right. I've got plenty. Esau is offering in every way to be helpful. And Jacob is trying his best not to offend him, but Jacob is declining everything that Esau is offering. And so Esau kind of takes the hint and goes on. And Jacob never goes to Seir. Now, it's an open question whether he intended to at the moment and then thought better of it. We don't know. It may have been that he just still doesn't quite believe that Esau really could have forgiven him, and he just never quite is able to just forgive himself for all he's done to Esau in the past, and to think that Esau really could forgive him. We don't know. A lot we don't know. But they don't go to Seir where Esau is, and that's, as we've already said, it's probably for the best. Again, Seir is not really in the land that would be central to the people of Israel later on. Anyway, it's not really near where they grew up. It is south of and kind of southeast of the Dead Sea, and the land that Jacob and his descendants, who will be known as, and Jacob is Israel, is his name now. And his descendants are going to be known as the children of Israel. And their land proper is going to be on the west side of the Dead Sea and the west side of the Jordan River mostly. Some of it on the east side. But where Jacob ends up going is in what is later known as the land of Israel. And so anyway, he goes to a place called Succoth. That means grass huts, and built him a house. Now, the word for house there, I don't think really means hut, and so it's an open question whether it was a permanent dwelling. But again, it doesn't sound like he stayed there all that long. He made booths and huts for his cattle, and that's why they called it Succoth. And then he comes, in verse 18 is a little bit, there are a couple of different ways that that's translated. The King James says he came to Shalem, which literally means safely or safety. It can be an adverb or a noun. A city of Shechem. The Revised Standard Version translates it that he came safely to the city of Shechem, which kind of makes sense because then in the next verse it says he buys a piece of a field where he had spread his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father. Now we're going to find out that Shechem is a town that's named after a man in the next chapter as it connects up to this. But this is the second time that one of the patriarchs has bought land in Canaan. Abraham bought a piece of land from the sons of Heth as a burial plot for his wife Sarah back in chapter 23. And that's the only piece of land that he had title deed to, so to speak, during his lifetime. Jacob comes back into the land after being gone 20 years and buys a piece of land not for a burial place, but for a place to live and to raise his children and to multiply and to have a good life. This place that he buys does become the burial place of Joseph when they bring Joseph's bones back from Egypt during the Exodus. In Joshua 24, I think it's verse 32, it says that at Shechem is where they buried the bones of Joseph. Now, earlier, when Jacob has died over in Egypt and they bring his body back, they bury him in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac are buried, and Jacob, of course. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the patriarchs, and Joseph is one of the 12 sons of the patriarchs. Anyway, so he's buried in Shechem later on. But the final thing, he not only buys a piece of land, and we're told that he has built a house at another place. And so he's settling in that area in a sort of a permanent kind of way. No longer sojourning, no longer camping. This is the land. And he's practicing his faith that God had told him, I'll give you this land, that night when he saw the ladder with the angels going up and down. And he builds an altar. First time we read about Jacob building an altar, and he calls it God, the God of Israel. And it's not that the altar is the God of Israel, but the altar is an altar to the God of Israel. Remember what he said when he saw the ladder, and the next morning, if the Lord will take me on my journey and give me bread to eat and clothes to wear, and so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then will the Lord be my God. Just a chapter or two earlier, when Laban had come chasing after him, and they piled up that heap of stones and that pillar, and they made a covenant and swore that they would not come on the other one's side of that heap of stones to hurt the other one. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father, by the fear of Isaac. But now, God is the God of Israel, and he is Israel. Now he has his own faith. Now he has his own walk with God. Now it's not, I'm following the God of my father. Now he is my God. God, the God of Israel. Makes all the difference whether you know the Lord your own self personally. We don't need a hand-me-down faith from our parents. It's great for them to influence us and for us to influence our children, but we each need to have our own relationship with him. That's why God gave his son, Jesus Christ, who came into this world, was born of a virgin, lived a perfect life, so he could die on the cross the death that each one of us deserved to die, and die as a substitute and a sacrifice for us. He who was perfect, he who knew no sin, became sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Christ rose from the dead, living proof that his death was enough to purchase forgiveness for us. And God offers it to us freely if we will trust him. Let's trust him. Let's not be like Jacob, who was a little bit reluctant to trust that his brother had forgiven him. Let's trust that God has forgiven us in Christ, and it can be ours. Have a good night, folks, and thanks for joining us.